Okay, I think we'll begin today. I'm Megan Kimatek, Director of Director at ACTE. Thank you all for taking time to join us today. We are excited for our webinar on making CTE classrooms more inclusive for LGBTQ plus students. I just have a few housekeeping items, and then I will kick off the webinar to our moderator and panelists. With that, we just want to remind you that we have an upcoming IAED webinar in October. We hope everyone will plan to join. It's on October 5th at 2 p.m. and it's a part 2 of a series on confronting isms in the classroom. If you missed the part 1, you can still attend, and the recording of part 1 is listed on our website here. So feel free to watch the recording and then register for the part 2. Some people are even inviting their classroom students to watch the recording of part 1 and join part 2. So we love to hear that we are extending some of this to students and teachers alike. So also, if anyone is interested in hosting one of these webinars, please feel free to reach out to me. We have some topics that we would like to see covered in the series that is going through till spring 2022. Or if you have your own topic you feel we haven't covered yet, I would be happy to hear that as well. So yeah, we encourage you to get involved. With that, I am excited to introduce our moderator today, Anna Hall. Anna is a family and consumer sciences teacher in Ohio and has been participating as a mentor in the IAED mentorship program through ACTE over the past year. Anna is currently working on her doctoral degree and is interested in researching the inclusion of LGBT students in high schools. Thank you so much, Anna, for your time and expertise. I am excited to hear from you. With that, I will kick it over to you.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm so excited that creating inclusive spaces for our LGBTQ plus students are such a priority for everyone who is attending today. And I want to start off by thanking our panelists, who I will introduce you to in a few minutes. So before we get started today, I have a quick poll for you. Is your school or place of profession doing anything to target LGBTQ community and to make your workplace more inclusive for this population? So go ahead and answer this question. If you are doing something great in your place of employment, please let us know by typing it into the chat so that we can all see the great things that are being done across the country. I'll give you a couple minutes. Okay, give you about 30 more seconds. Again, if you're doing anything in your place of employment to help create more inclusion for LGBTQ people, please let us know. I'm seeing some great things coming in. Restrooms being available for non-binary people, that's very important to create an inclusive environment. I'm seeing some PD sessions, equity coordinators, working with the GLSEN curriculum and their safe space program. Wonderful. All right, let's go ahead and see this poll. All right, it's about 50-50. Right, good. We have some places to grow, but I'm glad to see that so many places are already creating inclusive classrooms and spaces for LGBTQ people. I just want to let you know before we get started, I will be watching the chat as we go along. So if you have some questions for our panelists, please drop them into the chat. I will try to be keeping my eye on that. If the question really is a follow-up to something we're currently talking about, I will interrupt the speakers or add it in right then. Otherwise, we will hold off on the questions until the end and try and get to all of those. So again, welcome. We are so happy to have you. I'm going to kick us off today by introducing your 4 panelists, and I will introduce them and then give them each a couple of minutes to just kind of tell us why this work is important to them and why they are here with us today. So first up is Chaney Mosley. Chaney Mosley is an assistant professor of agricultural education at Middle Tennessee State University. He has more than 20 years of experience in CTE, including as a middle and high school teacher, a high school administrator, and CTE director. He is currently a mentor in the ACTE IAED mentorship program. Welcome, Chaney.
Thanks for having me. Would you like me to go ahead and answer your question now? All right, I appreciate it. Yeah, glad to be here. I'll be pretty brief on this. This is important. I reflect on my own high school experiences and post-secondary experiences as well. And when I do that, I recall thinking, wow, if only I knew someone in my school who was like me, or if I heard someone, an authoritative figure, a teacher, or another adult provide affirming statements that it was okay to be thinking like I was thinking or feeling like I was feeling, my experiences would have been a lot better. And now as a father of 3 children, I'm observing some interesting experiences in there as they go through their own education as well that really make this an important topic to me, and I'm happy to be here and share more about that later.
Thank you, Chaney. We're so happy to have you. Next up is Joyce Mcclellan. Joyce is currently the Chief Development and Diversity Officer at Tulsa Technology Center. She has been with Tulsa Tech for 15 years and serves on the executive leadership team. She currently leads the student placement and outreach departments. Joyce is responsible for reactivating the Tulsa Tech Diversity Council, or DC. Joyce and the DC executive officers provide diversity and inclusion training to the district during onboarding of new employees and during student and staff professional development days. Joyce received a bachelor's from Lincoln University and her master's degree from University of Oklahoma. She completed her doctoral degree from Oklahoma State University in 2006. Welcome, Joyce.
Well, thank you, Ms. Anna. I'm Joyce Mcclellan, everyone. So happy to be here. And to answer the question, I think as all career tech educators, our goal is to make sure that every student is successful. And our goal is to remove all those barriers that prevent them from being successful. And one of our mission statement is to ensure that every single one of our students is successful and moves on to career or college. So with that, we know that certain groups of students have challenges, and our goal is to make sure that we remove those barriers so students can be successful. And that's why this work is so important, because we're looking at our demographics, and we're seeing that we certainly have students that present and consider themselves in the LGBTQ plus family. So we know that we've got work to do, and we're ahead of the curve a little bit, but we certainly have work to do. So for those of you that have not started this work, which I saw about 50%, we've got information for you. And for the other 50%, hopefully we can learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. We're looking forward to learning from your expertise. Our next panelist is Heather Gay. Heather uses she, her, hers pronouns and is the Director of Construction and Management Programs at Dunwoody College of Technology in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She has been involved in the construction industry for 25 years and higher education for 13. Heather referees roller derby, has 2 giant dogs, and spends as much time enjoying the music scene in Minneapolis. Welcome, Heather.
Thanks so much. This topic is incredibly important to me. I think first off, from just the overall perspective that our queer youth do not get the same support from a mental health perspective. And I think the statistic is over 40% of queer youth attempt suicide or have considered attempting suicide. And that's a really staggering number and something that concerns me. I got into the construction industry really young, and I fell in love with it, and I didn't see anybody who looked like me or who was like me on a job site. And I realized that one of the things that's so very important is the idea that we're all telling our stories and finding someone who's like us out there. And so for me, being involved in this it's personal, it's professional, it's kind of all of that all together. And so it's a really important area and very close to my heart.
Thank you, Heather. Yeah, it's so affirming to youth when they can see themselves represented in people in power and people in leadership and people just in their everyday lives. So thank you for being here. Our final panelist today is Kirk Magg. Kirk is an agricultural and timber industry attorney. Kirk grew up working on his family's farm and feedlot in Eastern Oregon. His law practice involves advising clients on issues related to buying and selling farmland and forest land, water rights, and protected species. Kirk graduated from Oregon State University's College of Agricultural Sciences with a degree in environmental economics, policy, and management. He earned his law degree at Georgetown Law in Washington, D.C. Kirk is the president of the board of directors for the Cultivating Change Foundation, a national nonprofit with a mission to value and elevate LGBTQ agriculturalists. He is also the immediate past chair of the board of directors for the Oregon FFA Foundation. Welcome, Kirk.
Thanks, Anna. Well, this is a very personal topic to me, and it started with growing up in rural America. And I know that when you look at the news, Oregon gets labeled as a progressive blue state. But when you grow up in a small agricultural community, it's a very conservative place to grow up. And I identify with a lot of LGBTQ students who grew up in small conservative rural areas. I also have this deeply rooted passion for ag, timber, and other natural resource industries, and recognize that we need more young people returning to those industries, not fewer, and that the only way that we're going to do that is if we send the unequivocal message to those students that all are welcome within those industries. And so my work with the Cultivating Change Foundation is to really send the message and where necessary shift the paradigm to let students know, and our mission focuses particularly on LGBTQ students, that careers in ag, timber, and natural resources are absolutely careers that are open to them.
Thank you, Kirk. I was so excited when I first learned about Cultivating Change Foundation and the work that you are doing to just help bring awareness to LGBTQ people in agricultural fields. So thank you for being here, everybody. Let's go ahead and jump in with those questions. Remember, if you have any questions for the panelists, you can type them into the chat and I will be monitoring that as we go. So our first question, I'm going to start with Joyce. How can CTE educators help provide support for LGBTQ community that they need to feel safe, secure, and comfortable in their learning environment?
And a great question. I think I'm going to sort of answer this as quickly as possible, but for that 50% that said that they don't quite have any programs going yet, I'm going to start with, it's really important to start at the top. As we all know, any kind of change happens with our school boards, with our executive teams, and we must make sure that that language of support and recognition is in our mission, vision, and our core values. So it's important that we start there. So those of you that are thinking about a program but have not yet started, when you do your strategic planning, make sure that there's language and initiatives wrapped into that program, because that's what's going to drive the work. So please make sure you do that first, because as we know, being in education, that teachers play a crucial role in supporting and advocating for our LGBTQ+ students, and all students, of course, but certainly education is typically where our students come out. They presented work, they work at school, they typically learned how what it feels to identify with certain situations at school. And we've got to be there to support them. So in order to give them that safe place where they can, spread their wings and figure out who they are, we've got to make it a safe place. And it starts with our teachers, our counselors, our administrators, and everyone that works in the school system. And we do that once we have that language in our mission and vision. We must do things by demonstrating diversity training, LGBTQ+ training, so that people understand the language, that we are comfortable and we understand the dynamics of these young people just trying to learn who they are, supporting them regardless of what our personal beliefs are. We've got to arm our administrators and our counselors and teachers with that information so that they know the importance of them, not showing any kind of bias or anything like that, but letting these students be who they are by doing things as asking them, what's your chosen name? May I use this name in front of your family? We have went through a process of making sure that all of our forms and emails and all those kinds of things, there's a place for legal names and there's a place for chosen names. And we are going to give students the opportunity to use their chosen names. We're not going to fight that battle, but we are going to ask questions like, can we use this name in front of, your family members? Can we use this name at your other high school? We need to make sure that we keep them safe. And I encourage instructors to do things like, especially when school starts, putting up the gay pride flag to let students know that all are welcome here. Using pronouns, introducing yourself using your pronouns. I don't know if you can see my pen, but it says, ask me about my pronouns. And we've got those so we can give those to teachers so students know that this is a safe place. And we're also doing things like starting student resource groups and student advisory groups, mentoring groups, so students can let us know how we're doing it. And do they feel as though we're keeping them safe? I know that's a lot, Anna, but I do want to give something for those that are just starting this process and those that are more seasoned. And if you have anything you'd like to share, please put it in the chat so we can share.
Thank you. Cheney, did you have any follow-ups for that?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off what Anna said in the beginning, is that we must attend to inclusion, access, equity, and diversity through all of our programming. And as career and technical educators, our programming involves so much more, as we know, than classroom instruction. And while classroom instruction is critically important, I'm going to hit pause on that and come back to that in a moment. Because what's unique to career and technical educators that other educators in our schools may not have to attend to is the responsibility to plan and prepare work-based learning opportunities for our students, to prepare them for the world of work, and also to engage our students in career and technical student organizations. And so I want to spend a moment, if I may, just addressing those two things and how through those two learning opportunities, we can better support our youth who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, etc. So first, let's talk about work-based learning. We know it's critically important that students have experiential learning opportunities, be it job shadows or internships or industry field trips and things such as that. But what a disservice to our students it would be if we were to arrange a job shadow experience for them and send them on to an industry partner without exploring whether or not that partner had human resource policy that reflected a culture and an environment of inclusivity. Imagine the destruction that could be caused by a student who participated in a job shadow and then they heard language or they observed behavior that did not support their identification or their lifestyle. That could really be tragic, especially as we are trying to encourage students to pursue work and post-secondary education in the fields in which we teach. So that's something that we really need to think about as we're planning and preparing WBL's opportunities for our students. The second is in regard to career and technical student organizations. And this is a question that I'm asked more frequently than I wish, but it often comes to me as a teacher educator in, like this. What do I do if I have 4 students going on a trip, all 4 females? I'm typically, all 4 identifies females. I typically room 4 females together. They share a bed. And one of the 4 females identifies as a lesbian. I'm like, well, what? I don't understand the question here. What's the dilemma? But often the students that I teach and the parents of high school students that I used to teach really struggle with this idea that my child can't stay in a room or share a bed with someone of the same sex, but who has a different sexual orientation. I also get the question regarding how do I provide housing in a hotel for a student who identifies as transgender when I know my parents are the parents of other students are going to have an issue with that. And so there is not a clear-cut response to this. Often it is a district or school level policy that can guide that. But I would encourage you to reach out to the state or the National Career Technical Student Organization for counsel and for how they may handle those questions at the national level as they plan and organize overnight trips that involve youth from diverse backgrounds and diverse cultures. Briefly, I'll circle back to the classroom instruction. One of the most important things I believe we can do in our classrooms while teaching is when we hear students or teachers in our presence use language that is inappropriate or intolerant, we call out that inappropriate language as not being acceptable, and we're unapologetic about it. It doesn't mean we have to be aggressive about it, but it is important to call it out and set the expectation for what is and is not appropriate in our classrooms.
Cheney and Joyce, thank you so much for that input. Those were two very different perspectives, and I think really help people understand some of the breadth of these issues that we're talking about. So my next question is for you, Heather. What types of professional development, training, or resources would you recommend related to LGBTQ+ issues? I know she's got a lot for us.
Well, I am going to paste in the chat a bunch of links. And I also want to make sure to honor Joyce and she has a bunch of resources as well that can be shared. I've asked that this list be emailed out if people would like it as well, because there's no way you're going to get them all if I just list them off. I think for one of the things to first think about is we need to be able to normalize training around LGBTQ issues. And so this should be something that is a part of annual faculty development. And if it's not right now, it's our role as educators to ask the question for whomever it is who's leading faculty development or development at the college to get that encouraged to move forward. Make it public, make it something that you can, even if you're not getting support necessarily from the full administration, there's nothing that says you couldn't start a book club or have a group of your colleagues do a lunch and learn together where you're doing some of these, topics together. I'm a huge fan of grassroots wherever we can, and I think it's really important to know we can make some of that change happen and move that dynamic forward. So some of the resources that I have found that have been incredibly helpful, and this whole panel has, I am sure, tons and tons of them, is I'm a big podcast listener, and Learning for Justice has a podcast called Queer America, and one of the topic areas does cover education on that, but just from that broad history perspective of understanding what we look like and where we are. It's a really wonderful podcast. They also have webinars and workshops that you can do. There's the Consortium of Higher Education LGBT Resource Professionals, and you can find a local LGBTQ center on that website, and you might be able to just go to your local college or university that's nearby that might have some of those queer resources really available for you. The University of Pittsburgh, the Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies program has a whole fantastic list of gender inclusive, non-sexist language. Coming from the construction industry, I have a tendency to hear a lot of you guys, and I want to be really careful when I'm in the classroom with my construction students that that's not the language that I'm using. So thinking about how we can, get past that. I also think it's important to remember we're not all at the same place. We were doing on our diversity, equity, and inclusion curriculum committee. I started to use the term BIPOC and cisgender, and not everybody in that group, we're all educators and we're all learning all the time, was aware of what those terms meant. And so, we want to get everybody to be at a place where they can learn and feel comfortable learning as well. The gay, lesbian, GLSEN, I always want to add another acronym to that, has some great resources. The Trevor Project, campuspride.org. And I will paste all of these fantastic resources in the chat so people can take a look at it. But that's a good starting place. Hopefully that was not too many to begin with. Not in.
Thank you, Heather. And just so everyone knows, this will be posted here in the chat, and also it will be emailed out to everyone who said that they were attending the webinar today so that we can all get this great list of resources. So thank you, Heather, for putting that together. My next question is for Cheney. How does your school or program address student pronouns, and why is this a helpful when related to inclusivity? Do you introduce yourself with your own pronouns, and why would we do this?
I love this question. My school, Middle Tennessee State University, does not mandate or expect that anyone, any faculty, student, or staff introduce themselves using pronouns. However, it is certainly encouraged if folks want to do that. So I appreciate that inclusive environment. When I'm teaching, I do a couple of things. At the beginning of every class, I give my students a sociogram, an online survey. And one of the questions that I ask there is, what is your preferred name? And then I ask, with which gender do you identify? And I provide a list of options. And then I provide an open-ended response as well, because I don't claim to be an expert. And I know that some students may not like the categories that I have provided based on the research that I found. I do the same with race and ethnicity as well. And so that lets me know, like, I get a report of what my students' biological sex is, but that's irrelevant. I want to know how they feel. And by simply asking that question, it sends that message to all of my students that in this classroom, we are cultivating an environment that is inclusive and supportive of all gender identities and the names that people appreciate. When I introduce myself, I don't, I've seen folks go, "Hi, my name is Cheney. My pronouns are he, him, his." I don't take, this is, my approach is a little different. I just introduce, I'm Cheney, and you can call me Cheney, you can call me Dr. Mosley. If you are sending, if you're talking about me, refer to me as a he or something like that. So it's not so, because it's not so like robotic and I don't know, like strategic. It's more like, yeah, just like as you talk about me, as I know that you will, use the word he to describe me. And the students usually laugh at it, but again, it adds some levity, I guess, to the conversation, and I appreciate that. The other thing that I will say, circling back to career tech student organizations, I teach about parliamentary procedure in one of my classes, and it always comes up. How do I address a student? Like historically, we've been taught to say, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, Mr. President, Madam President. And so either the question will come up or I'll ask my students, how do you address the chairperson if they are gender non-binary or you don't know what their gender is? And it is a great question. Throw that out in your classrooms, let your students grapple with it and let them figure that out. And there are mixed responses to that. So I'll let you do your own digging on that one, but it's a great way, again, to facilitate those conversations.
Thank you. Kirk, do you have anything to add about pronouns?
Yeah, so I'll share an example from an event that I recently hosted for the Cultivating Change Foundation, where you would think that I would be thinking, more proactively about pronouns. But I realized that when everyone RSVP'd for the event, I only asked for people's first and last names. And I had planned on printing up these really nice name tags. But then I recognized that certain guests there may want to add pronouns to their name tag. And what I didn't want to have happen was for their name tags to look different just because they wanted to add pronouns. And I could have added space for it. But what I decided to do instead, because I'm learning too, I decided to scrap the pre-printed name tags. And I just took black Sharpies and blank name tags and allowed every guest at the event to create their own name tag, so that everyone was able to identify as they wanted to, and that some people's name tags didn't look different because they had added to it with a Sharpie. So, I think there are ways that we can think about how we invite people to show up and how kind of our standard approach to name tags might send the message to some that they're not able to express their pronouns if it's helpful to them or important to them in conversations. So just one thing to think about. But the other thing that I will do in the future to signal, that it's important to our organization that people have that opportunity. Next time I'm going to have in the RSVP link an opportunity for people to add their pronouns so that that can be put on the name tags, but to signal to people in advance of the event that this is going to be an inclusive event where we provide people the opportunity to have included on the name tag other information that is important for them to be able to convey to other attendees at the event.
Great, thank you so much. All right, Kirk, this next question is for you as well. What can CTE educators do to be more inclusive of LGBTQ plus students inside and outside the classroom? What are some of the best practices or takeaways for inclusivity for the LGBTQ plus community?
Yeah, so I'm gonna start but just kind of with a thought about my approach or philosophy to kind of helping students achieve their goals or helping expand maybe what they think is possible. What I know from my experience is that students are more likely to pursue careers when they see people that they identify with in those careers. And so the more we can do to provide examples to our students of people in careers where they might not have thought about a particular gender or a person with a particular gender or sexual orientation or something else going into that field, we can help expand what students might have thought possible and expand their career trajectory and opportunities. So one example that I will share, I was returning from the Oregon FFA state convention a few years ago, and a friend called me, my best friend, and said, hey, my niece came back from the state FFA convention and she's always wanted to be a veterinarian, but she got back from state convention and said, I am going to be a state secretary of agriculture. And my friend kind of scratched his head, like, why all of a sudden after 3 or 4 years did she change her career trajectory? Well, I mean, it was obvious to me because I'd been in the audience when Alexis Taylor, the director of the Oregon Department of Agriculture, who is a charismatic, energetic woman who exerts, confidence and enthusiasm for her job. It was not surprising to me that a young woman in the audience saw that and didn't say, that's what I want to be someday. And so I think as educators, we can think about how can we, whether it's inviting guest speakers into our classroom or virtually, or using examples when we're telling stories, and instead of using a, what might be the stereotypical gender for a particular person in an example, think about another way to describe that person and influence or bring in speakers and examples that help to expand or break down the stereotypes that our students might otherwise have. I guess just one or two other quick thoughts about making sure that we're making our classrooms inclusive. We've talked about some resources that we can make available to educators, but think about on a bulletin board within the classroom, providing some resources that students can see. And what I can tell you, sometimes the students who need to see those things the most, you will never know that they saw it. You will never see them go up and like rip a phone number off of the bulletin board, but seeing something that says the Trevor Project on the bulletin board, they might go home and Google that, and it might be the most affirming thing that student has seen that day. A couple of years ago, the Cultivating Change Foundation had a booth at the Oregon FFA, Future Farmers of America for all the acronyms, but so Cultivating Change had a booth there. I guarantee you that not every state in the US right now would be enthusiastic about us having a booth at their state FFA convention. But there weren't a ton of students that came up and engaged in an in-depth conversation about the work that we're doing. But I guarantee you, having been a closeted high school student who attended the state FFA convention 20 years ago, that had that booth been there when I was a student, it would have been such an affirming message to me. And so I think it's important that we think about the things that we present and make available, whether it's on the bulletin board or as other kinds of resources that students might see. We'll never know that it made a difference, but I can tell you right now that there will be a student that you've made a difference in their life for doing that.
Fantastic. Joyce, did you have something quick that you wanted to add to this as well?
Well, Kirk, I think he said it all pretty much. The only thing I wanted to mention is, from my perspective, being the diversity officer, I am making sure that our district understands the professional development available for teachers that don't quite know how to make their classrooms inclusive or their campuses inclusive. And we've got a myriad of information where we have a 3-minute segment where they can learn something really quickly. And then my other focus is making sure that all the other students in the classroom understands how to respect each other, their differences. We work really, really hard to make sure that our students understand that when employers are looking for employees, they also want students that are employees that understand how to appreciate diversity and appreciate each other's differences. So we work really hard on the PD part to make sure our campuses are inclusive, the classrooms, we give that information to the instructors. And then we get feedback from the students that ask, what else can we do? We worked on bathrooms for the last couple of years, so I think we're in a good space there. We're trying to make sure every student knows that that there's absolutely, we prohibit bullying and calling people out and making people feel less than. That work we do with all students so that all students know how to appreciate differences. Again, so that as we prepare them for the workforce, they know that their employers are also going to expect that same level of attention.
Thank you, Joyce. All right, we're starting to run a little bit short on time, so we'll try and get through some of these pretty quickly so we can get to the few questions from our community. Heather, how can we personally reflect on our own biases, and how can we work to improve these? Do you have any suggestions for us?
I do. I think the first thing is to recognize that we have bias. No human, no matter how amazing we are or how open we are, doesn't have bias. And so it's important for us to educate ourselves on what that looks like and what that really means internally for us. And I'm not sure if this is a surprise to anyone, but I would say one of the best places to go to understand implicit bias is the Harvard implicit bias IAT test. And there is a myriad of different options there, from race to gender to transgender to weight, that you can do these personal, like, to see what your own biases are and what you might have a strong preference for. It's not a perfect resource by any means, but it is really enlightening. And I think if you can be honest with yourself and understand that it is a kind of a quick temperature gauge for you on what is really important, on what you think of as bias, it can help you be more open to what you can do in your classroom. There is also the NEA Center for Social Justice has some resources on personal bias and some write-up around language, and I think those are really important. I also think that we need to, like, this, I'm not going to take credit for this, but this was something that was done in a training that I attended, which is to understand that when we start to look at, we're talking about LGBTQ plus issues here, and we start to think of all we know in history is that the famous people we know in history are tragedies. We're not giving fairness to the full spectrum of what it means to be queer. And so one of the ways that I was taught in this workshop to do this is take 5 minutes every day and educate yourself on one person in history who is different than you, and find out something really great about what you can celebrate about them, what might have been a challenge for them, and how you can weave that into your story in your classroom. So I found that to be incredibly helpful, because it's not like it's something that has to take a ton of time, but it is something where I'm just taking those few minutes every day or even once a week to say, I want to learn something about a bias that I didn't really realize I had. And so how can I teach myself? And lastly, I think that one of the most important ways that we can do this is to understand what we're getting out of our media feed. And if you're on social media, you are curating your own experience. And so what you can do is start to change what that feed looks like. Start to follow people who might be talking about queer issues or diversity, equity, and inclusion. Look at what educators are doing on the different feeds. And specifically, I'm thinking about Instagram or Facebook, but even your news outlets, as you're looking through that, that's going to come back and curate to you. So I think that's a really helpful way to change and get a better understanding of what your personal biases are.
Thank you, Heather. We're going to shift gears a little bit. Cheney, I have a question for you. How do we normalize students whose family members might identify as LGBTQ+, and what are some of the best practices for teachers to have more inclusive language when talking about families?
Love that question. We've been experiencing that for a while. My husband and I adopted 3 children. They all identify as boys currently. So I'll say we've adopted 3 boys, and we've experienced this in preschool, daycare, preschool, elementary school, and now middle school. So a couple of repeating themes that we see regularly are stories or books that include families with hetero parents, so a mother and a father. So one practice, and it, I guess in CTE we're probably not reading stories or books to our kids, but we are telling stories for sure. And so as we tell stories, we can incorporate characters or examples of families that have different family makeups, especially in regard to parents. So we might refer to a character or a student or someone as having 2 dads or 2 moms, or just make sure that we're intentional about having those conversations. In agriculture, many of us teach horticulture. I know that Mother's Day occurs in May, and I know that agriculture is not the only career cluster that probably lends itself well to incorporating holidays into some of the things that we teach. But I think it's important to be aware that not only do youth who have non-hetero parents, they may not have a mother or a father. They may have 2 mothers or 2 fathers, or just one of each. This is inclusive pedagogy for every student, because some students don't live with a parent. They live with a guardian, or they're in the foster system. Maybe it's a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle they work with. So these practices aren't only good for youth that come from LGBTQ families, but also just all kids in general. When we're referencing siblings is a great word to use. Instead of, do you have any brothers or sisters, do you have any siblings? Tell me about your sibling. It's not gender specific, so we can easily do that. And so those are just a few things. Lastly, I was observing a student teacher, the teacher was talking about phenotype and genotype, teaching about genetics, and mentioned that you get things like your eye color from your mother or your father. And a student in the high school classroom sitting in front of me said, unless you're adopted, because I think the student teacher said from your mom or dad. I think, and the student in front of me said, unless you're adopted, because my mom and dad, I didn't get, to himself, but not to the teacher. It was a really eye-opening moment for me, like, inclusive pedagogy. I hadn't thought about this. So I'd just like to provide that anecdote as an example of things that we really just need to be aware of. Lastly, one more thing. The forms that we ask parents to fill out, let's not put mother's name and father's name. in my state, even on the amended birth certificates, there's a spot for mother's name and father's name, and so I just crossed out mother and wrote father. So, so just think about that. It can be guardian 1 and or guardian 2, things like that.
Thank you, Cheney. That's a lot of great examples for us to think about. Storytelling is such an important part of teaching. So Kirk, real quick, how can LGBTQ plus professionals live authentically through their honest identities within their professions?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. And I think it has to come back to the fact that people living authentically looks different depending on who you are. And we should not expect that every LGBTQ plus person has to show up at work with that identity on their sleeve. You know, I do think that there is a benefit to students when they have LGBTQ plus individuals, you know, in the education space that they can look to and identify with. But I don't want us to create an expectation that if you're a member of the LGBTQ community, that you have to be the trailblazer out in front breaking down those barriers. And so we each show up in authentic ways, in a way that feels honest and comfortable for ourselves. And when I started at my current job, I was not out. These days I show up at work very differently. And if you look at my online bio for my law firm, one of the things that I've done to be very intentional is I reference not only my board position for the Cultivating Change Foundation on the front page of that bio, I also mention that the mission of the organization is to value and elevate LGBTQ plus individuals. So I find a way to weave that into the narrative or the picture that I'm painting of myself to the world. And so I think we want to create places in which educators feel comfortable showing up with all their identities, but that we shouldn't necessarily push people to do that when they're not comfortable doing so. I think, you know, I work in the private sector. I feel for my sister's a vice principal at a high school, for the additional challenges that come to play for LGBTQ plus individuals working in a more public space. You know, there's an example of a school district 30 minutes from downtown Portland, what people view as like a liberal mecca of the US, that has banned political displays in classrooms, which includes pride flags and Black Lives Matter signs. So you know, my heart goes out to the educators out there that are facing these really difficult issues where they want to be inclusive and embrace the students in their classrooms, but are faced with some policies that make it difficult to do that.
Great, thank you so much. All right, I'm going to ask a question from a participant, Julie. Heather, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot because I feel like this might be right in your wheelhouse. Julie asks, many of our programs are historically gendered, which can create hurtful stereotypes for all students who choose to participate. How can CTE administrators and teachers help to ungender our programs to make them safe spaces for LGBTQ students and all of our students?
I saw this question and I was like, oh, please let me answer it, or at least participate in it. Well, I think one of the ways that we have to do this is we have to start telling stories to either potential students or the current students that show that they're not the only person that is like them within the industry. And whether that is on your recruiting or marketing materials, is making sure that you have something that shows that it's not just like, for the example in here is like a medical assistance program. We have like a radiological technology program that's kind of a very similar thing where we're like 23 women and one male, is to be able to show that there is opportunity for anyone within that. So, you know, telling the stories. The next is, do you have representation on your faculty? I can tell you that just by virtue of me being in charge of the construction management program, I've had students come up to me that are not male and have said, you know, I never knew that this was an opportunity for me. So just a simple statement, representation matters, is huge. And so if you don't have faculty that can do that, or you don't have stories that you can tell, I would be going back to your industry partners and looking to see who can you bring in that can share those stories and just give students a resource, or potential students a resource. So if you have open houses, maybe it's bringing an industry partner in to be at that booth, like we do open houses, and have that industry partner there so they can answer some of the questions. I also think it's really, really critical to connect those students to industry as quickly as possible and find them a mentor or find them a relationship that will help them understand it may not be smooth sailing. And you know, speaking from being in the construction industry, it's important for students to understand, like, here may be some of the challenges you have, and also to be able to celebrate, here are some of the things that have been done to overcome them. Is that, did that answer all of it? I'm like so excited. I don't know if I missed anything, but I really do think representation is so critical in this conversation about trying to ungender programs. The one last thing I do want to mention is that I think it's also something where it's as simple as saying, we want our industries, we want our programs to represent our community. And currently our program doesn't represent the community.
Great. Thank you so much. That was a great answer to that question. Our next question comes from Sanal. He asks, do you think the messaging of CTE is inclusive enough to recruit and encourage LGBTQ+ students? If not, what should we be doing? Does anyone have an answer for us?
Let me start with just a very quick example, and I'm sure others have great examples too. Some of it comes down to, as others have said, it's about the teachers that are in the programs, or more broadly, kind of boards of directors or industry partners that are affiliated with these programs. And so, you know, my personal example, as immediate past chair of the Oregon Future Farmers of America Foundation Board, I was very open in the fact that I'm a gay man. And, you know, that trickles down to the organization to send the message that our organization is inclusive of LGBTQ+ students. And so I think if we can find more ways to highlight diversity when it exists within our student body, within our faculty, or with our industry partners, we can help. And it's not immediate, but it does signal that our programs are open to all.
Awesome, thank you. And I have one final question from Lauren. Do you have any guidance on the non-traditional field in Perkins with regards to LGBTQ+ community? This is something I personally am not familiar with. So is anyone familiar with this in Perkins? Okay. Lauren, we will try and find some information for you and get that to you. So I will make sure I write down your first and last name so we can try and get that. That is all of our questions today. I just want to say again, thank you so much to Joyce, Heather, Cheney, and Kirk for being here with us today and helping us learn and grow as professionals. And I can't wait to see how we all go out and create spaces in our profession for LGBTQ+ students. So thank you for being here, everyone.
On
Thank you
behalf
so
of
much,
ACT, we just want to thank everyone as well. And we will be reaching out to all attendees regarding some of these questions that the links Heather had and some of these questions. So thank you all for your participation, your time. And this will be posted on our webinars, what's it called, website. So you can see the recording there. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, Megan. Bye-bye. Panelists, you all rock. Thank you.
Thank you.